Hello everyone, it's me, Garrett of Oz. Sorry that it has been a while. I got some rather disappointing news at the start of October, coupled with an immense dislike for the edition of Sky Island that I picked up. I ended up not being all that interested and sort of needing a little bit of a break. And there were some other positive things going on as well. So I did not obviously get the video out in October. I'm barely getting it out in November, but that's okay. There will not be a Sky Island video, at least not at this juncture. Primarily because the edition I got, I'm not even sure what I did with it, to be totally honest, was a very, 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 very low budget, cheap affair with badly photocopied pictures, and it just was not what I wanted to get into. So I just said, you know what, I will read this eventually, but we're going to go back to the Oz books. So here we are, with the Scarecrow of Oz. As I probably mentioned in the last video, but in case I didn't, I read a late post-1935 edition. It's my first one with a dust jacket that I've been reading. I know, very fancy. Lovely sort of it's not really goldenrod. It probably might have been goldenrod at some point. It's kind of more of a taupey ochre color. But very nice edition, nonetheless. Oh, pardon me, my dogs are kind of running in and out, so they distract me a little bit. So I read The Scarecrow of Oz. This was a first time reading this one as well. And I found it incredibly delightful. Scarecrow of Oz, much like TikTok of Oz, does borrow heavily from a theatrical endeavor. This time, however, not a stage theatrical endeavor, but a film, known as His Majesty the Scarecrow of Oz. It was the third film produced by the Oz Film Manufacturing Company, following The Magic Cloak of Oz and The Patchwork Girl of Oz. The film itself was not overly well received. It actually didn't even get officially released as His Majesty. It officially got released as The New Wizard of Oz, because there is a lot of the plot from Wizard in it, as well as new plot from that turns into The Scarecrow of Oz. And unlike previous books, where I've disliked the very theatrical nature of them and the theatrical parts of the story, in this one I actually really did enjoy it. It's a sort of a light, frothy thing, and it's a big departure from Baum, who said in 1903, I'm quoting here, "Love, as depicted in literature, is a threadbare and unsatisfactory topic which children cannot comprehend, neither in its esoteric nor exoteric meaning. Therefore, it has no place in their storybooks." He reaffirmed it again in 1909 and said, "There is, or ought to be, a difference between the child literature of the present day and of the past. In the early ages, the only stories were folklore, myths, legends, fairy stories, and they were for all, young and old. Hence, they contained elements which are no longer needed. Now that every age and class have their own literature, love is unnecessary in stories distinctly for children. They do not care for it. I leave it out." However, he also knew that given the timing of his works, and given the nature of theater, particularly musical comedy of the turn of the century, and really up through about the era of Oklahoma, which this is here, 1916, so we're 30 years away from Oklahoma. Love was a big thing, and it had to be there. It was what would draw the crowds in. They wanted a love story, no matter how contrived, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how threadbare a plot it was. That's still kind of true to a degree today. And for that, I point you towards the Hallmark Channel, or Lifetime. Really more the Hallmark Channel, though, because Lifetime really likes the murder. And in fact, later, after he allowed the romance in with TikTok Man of Oz, or excuse me, TikTok of Oz. I keep wanting to call it that because of the play. And he let it in as well with the Scarecrow of Oz. Later, even saying that he introducing it as a slightly novel theme. He said, it smacked a bit of the Andersen fairy tales, and I watched the effect upon my readers. They accepted it gleefully, with all the rest it being well within their comprehension. So he sort of went back and said, okay. Kids liked it. It was, and it's true. I think especially in this one, much more so than in the other ones, because this is a love story that children can grasp the concept of. But we'll come to that in a moment. So, the basic overall plot is Baum wanted to get, after I think he truly really loved the characters of Trot and Captain Bill, and obviously Button Bright, because Button Bright was in Road to Oz, he was in Sky Island. And obviously Trot and Captain Bill have two stories of their own, Sea Fairies and Sky Island. So I think when their series didn't take off, he thought, well, I love them, let's bring them to Oz, since obviously I could make more money that way. So that's what he did. So it starts with the two of them getting caught in a whirlpool, being pulled down into an undersea cavern, rescued by mermaids, and left in an underground cavern, where they're shortly joined by an orc. Now, the orc itself is a rather bizarre character. Here's Neil's illustration of him on page 32. Boop. Really not a good way to describe him. But he's friendly enough, and he offers to help them. And so, first they make a journey to an island where they met the little old man who didn't agree with anybody and had literally been dumped there by his neighbors for being so unpleasant. And from there, they make the journey to Mo, as we all know, as Baum fans will remember from The Magical Monarch of Mo, which was also published by Bob Smerrill, not Riley and Britton or Riley and Lee. And that's where they find Button Bright. And then they make the journey across the Deadly Desert into Oz, this time to a country known as Jinxland, which is located in the southern country of Oz, the Quadling country, where they encounter Pawn, who is a gardener. He's the gardener's boy. He actually is of royal descent, but because his father deposed the former king, and then his father was deposed by the current king, King Cruel. This is stuff left over from that's about as theatrical as you can get. And this is where we really kind of get into the plot of His Majesty, the Scarecrow of Oz. Because Googly Goo is in love with Gloria, as well as Pawn, who is in love with Gloria. Now, Gloria is the rightful king's daughter and the princess. Gloria is in love with Pawn, but because Pawn is not of royal descent, officially, because of King Cruel, they cannot be together. King Cruel wants to sell her to Googly Goo because he can get good money off of her, apparently, and she's having none of it. So, King Cruel and Googly Goo, I really just like saying Googly Goo, conspire with Blinky, the Wicked Witch, to freeze Gloria's heart so that she cannot love Pawn, which they think will then make her want to marry Googly Goo. Unfortunately, that backfires and she just doesn't give a crap about anything. Of course, Glinda is looking at all this through her book of records and going, oh dear God. I sometimes think Glinda's the best. I love Glinda. Well, Glinda doesn't actually say, oh my God. I can just sort of hear the inner monologue of, oh. And so she sends the Scarecrow to rescue everybody. Which, of course, he does. They dethrone King Cruel. Gloria is placed on the throne. Pawn is able to marry her. Button Bright, Trot, Captain Bill move to Oz. The end. It's pretty much the basic plot of the story. And I actually really like the love story in this because it is simple. It's not Romeo and Juliet, which is ridiculous, but that's another story for another time. It's not overly ridiculous. It's not convoluted. It's very much, well, we can't be together because you're not royalty because of the evil king. And then he's frozen my heart, so I of course don't love you. But we're going to do some magic, and then, hey, my heart's unfrozen, I'm the actual queen, thanks to my good friend the Scarecrow here, and now it's a happy ending. It's a very simple-ish, but very basic story. There's no real, I don't want to say depth, that's not the right word, but it's definitely a story that kids can grasp. Whereas I didn't like the one in TikTok of Oz because it felt very contrived and very theatrical and very... And this, yes, it's theatrical and movie-esque. Cinematic, thank you. That's the real word I wanted, not movie-esque. It's definitely... I don't want to say more achievable, but it works better. It's a better use of the romantic storyline. There's not a lot of character development, nor should there be. Button Bright really basically just seems like he's here because Baum was like, well, I'm bringing the other two. Let's bring him. We'll just get him to Oz, and we'll call it a day. I mean, he really does very little for the plot overall. I mean, he's there, and that's about it. Trot and Captain Bill, likewise, don't really do much to affect the outcome of the story. In fact, they're not really even much of a narrative drive. It's very much, especially in the first chunk, until we get to Jinxland, it feels very much like Baum is just trying to get them there. And really, that's when the book picks up. It was one that started slow for me. But by the end, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can see why it was one of the more enduring books. You again have Ozma, who uses the magic picture and could just resolve all of this, but would rather sort of see what's going on anyways. The only real problem I think I have with the story is some of the fact that it is, if it were just the story of His Majesty the Scarecrow of Oz, with the pawn, that in and of itself is almost it could have been the full novel. It is the contrived nature, especially because Glinda says, well, I can't really figure out how to get them out of Oz, so I guess they're gonna have to stay. And Oz is like, oh, shucky darn. And I'm just like, well, what about Trot's mother? Because Trot has a mother. Is no one going to bother? I mean, Dorothy gets to bring Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. Button Bright's family doesn't care about him. That's established in Sky Island. And really established as well in Road to Oz. But Trot's mom seems to kind of like her from the little bit of Sky Island I read. Maybe I'm completely off base. If I am, don't be afraid to shout me out there. I don't know, that part in particular bothered me. Simply because I keep going, but wouldn't Trot's mother worry? And the fact that they were able to get to Oz easily by flying on an orc through some pink mist tells me that, well, can't they fly back out of Oz? Isn't that a thing that can happen? And as we're going to see, they do, at least in some ways, end up going to the Gnome Country, I believe, in the next one. But we'll come to that in a moment. So there we go. So that's kind of Scarecrow of Oz. Interestingly, it's one that's been republished a couple of extra times. Watermills published it on its own, I think in the early 90s. I don't have that specific edition. In fact, this is my only old copy. I do obviously have the Dover edition. I've got one of the white editions. I've got the white paperback edition. You know, and I'm sure it definitely also got the popular edition cover treatment when the movie came out, much like the Tin Woodman of Oz did and the Land of Oz did. and Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz did. Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz did. So it definitely was one that was reprinted. It sold relatively well. It sold 14,000 copies in the first year, which was better than TikTok. But it also kind of shows the slide off as we lead into World War I, because that's really where we're at. Yeah. So, I guess that kind of takes us in towards our next book, which is Rinckatink and Oz. Now, Rinckatink and Oz gets a little bit of crap, and by a little bit I mean a lot, because Rinckatink and Oz was not intended to be an Oz book at all. And it is only an Oz book because Dorothy shows up at the end. Dorothy and Ozma. I have not read this book, actually. My edition, I've got a first edition of it, but it is in it's readable, but it has kind of fallen apart. And because I don't want to do it any further damage, I will not be reading my first edition. It's beautiful. The illustrations, the color pictures are beautiful. So instead, I will actually be reading a 1960s edition with a Dick Martin cover. It's one of, I think, the two that I have with Martin covers. Because I have this and I have Wizard with Martin's cover. I have more Roycraft. Although I won't be reading one of the Roycraft covers. But I can always show them if people are interested. Are y'all interested in that sort of thing? Do you want to see pieces of the collection? Yes? No? Maybe? Let me know. But it is a it's a 1960s edition, so there's no color front piece. Kind of a drab spine. But this is Rinckatink and Oz. So we will start that tomorrow when I'm getting my oil changed. I'm taking a personal day to go get my oil changed in my car. Oh goodness. My copy of the Book Collector's Guide to Frank Baum is getting a lot of love. So there we go. So the next time is going to be Rinckatink. I'm going to do my best to have this up before the end of the year. For Americans, I hope y'all had a lovely Thanksgiving. For everybody, I hope you had a lovely Halloween. I have also sort of neglected my blog, but I'm going to get back into that shortly. I hope. Oh, actually, I do have... Oh, except I packed this bookcase a little too tight. Crap. I do actually have, and that's kind of a fun thing to show, I've got a Japanese edition of Scarecrow of Oz. Or as it is titled in, or as it's titled in Japan, The Wizard of Oz and Princess Gloria. And this is it. So it's illustrated throughout. There's Blinky the Witch turning Captain Bill into a grasshopper. Is there a picture of her freezing the heart? I don't think there is. They're much more sparse with their pictures. Oh, no, here we go. Here it is. Gloria getting turned into getting her heart frozen. Which is actually taken somewhat from the film. Here is what a Japanese orc looks like with Button Bright climbing on board. So rather a lot like a giant chicken. These are actually kind of fun illustrations. Here's Scarecrow being burned at the stake. Oh, and this is them after they, with the Scarecrow, after he gets soaked in the random giant waterfall. Which really, towards the end, really just felt like Baum was just like, we're just going to drag this out another couple of pages. We really don't need to. And here's Dorothy befriending Trot. Little tiny picture. So that's Princess Gloria there on the cover with a very interesting illustration of what an orc looks like. So, There you go. I've got a couple of Japanese editions. I've got Lost Princess, I've got Emerald City, I've got 2 editions of Ozma. I've got a whole bunch of editions of Wizard. I've got a couple editions of Ozma, I've got a couple editions of Wizard of Land. Couple editions of Emerald City. So I've got a handful of the Oz books. Those particular ones were illustrated by Yuichi Mieko. So there you go. So there was that. So hopefully you wanted to see stuff like that. If you didn't, well, then I'm sorry. I hope I didn't bore you. So anyhow, I will see you all next time. My hair will probably be longer. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I'm donating it. So it's in the growing out phase. And right now I kind of look very 1960s girlish because of the way my hair is flipping. So anyhow, that is all for me. If I don't make it before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. And I will see you all next time.